Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Keisha, and I am with the Family Council on the behalf of Student and Family Engagement. And today I have the wonderful opportunity to share information from our friends here at Student Counseling Services. And before we get started, I just want to let you all know a couple of things. At the end of today's webinar, you will be receiving a survey so you all can let us know how we can better assist you and your student throughout the academic school year. And once our presenter is done giving you all of the information, please feel welcome to put your questions and your comments in the Q&A section here in the Zoom. And then if you are watching us from Facebook, you can also place your comments in the comments section. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's special guest and our friend here, Erica with Student Counseling Services.
Thank you so much, Keisha, for that introduction. And I want to say thank you, everyone who's taken time today to join today's webinar. And so I do want to start with a little bit of some disclaimers. And so we were having some technology issues. And so because of that, I'm thankful to Carmen and Keisha, who is going to help me with getting this presentation moving right along. And so as Keisha shared, my name is Erica Johnson. I serve as the Assistant Director of Mental Health Promotion and Education with Student Counseling Services. And today's presentation is centered around how can you as parents, caregivers, really support your students' mental health as you are preparing for their transition in their first year here at UAB. So you can go ahead and get me clicked over. Excellent. So I like to start with this image of a charcuterie board because I think this will be reflective of today's presentation. And so like a charcuterie board, there's going to be some things that you're going to really enjoy. Then there's going to be some things that you're like, oh, I'm not quite sure if that will work for me, right? And so I want you to take what you learned throughout today's presentation and use that same thought process. And so there's going to be some things that you're like, that works really well with my parenting style and the relationship I have with my student. And then there's going to be some things that you're not quite sure if that's going to work, but you're willing to give it a try. And then there's going to be some absolutely nots, right? And so take what works, leave what doesn't. And that is really what I'm wanting you to think through as we're navigating today's presentation. And so, please. All right. And so throughout this, so one of the things that we often recommend to our parents are really thinking about how can you practice honest and strategic communication with your student. And so, Carmen, you can click through all of those to get all of that up there for me. And so for the one of the first things that we recommend is respecting your student's autonomy. And so as your student is preparing for this transition, there's going to be some mixed emotions, right? A lot of excitement, but then also some nerves because for the most part, you have really been in the driver's seat and really helping your student with their decision making, thought processing. And so now as they're getting ready to transition, they're going to then move into that driver's seat. And so we're not saying that you have to completely get out of the car, but really thinking about how will your role look different and how can you support your students' autonomy. Another suggestion is being transparent about just how you're doing and where you are with this transition as your student is adjusting, but then also being selective. And so really thinking about, okay, what are concerns that I can share with my student and I know that they have the capacity to hold and to process, and what are the things that may cause increased overwhelm or distress. And so really thinking through when you are communicating with your student, what am I communicating and what in many ways what am I wanting to get out of this communication. Something else to think about is let's agree on some communication norms because right now your student is in close proximity with you. And so you really don't have to think through when you're having conversations, when you're checking in, when are you just really thinking about when you're going to have some difficult conversations because you usually can just pop right into their room, pop into their space, and those conversations are able to happen more organically. But because they're going to be on campus in a new environment, you want to really be intentional to have a conversation with your student and ask, hey, what is going to be our communication norms? Are we going to do check-ins every day, whether that be in the morning, midday check-ins, or in the evening? Or are we going to do check-ins 3 times a week? Are we going to do once a week check-ins? Being able to establish those communication norms is really going to help with your students' transition and adjustment, but also you as you're navigating this process as well. And the more that we're able to communicate and set those norms, I think the more successful that you're going to be when we're wanting you to practice the honest and strategic communication. And then communicate from a place of curiosity and not control. And so for some of you, again, that driver's seat where you're helping your student to make decisions, you're laying out those options. And so now that your student is going to be on campus, they may reach out when they need support, or they may decide that, what, I want to figure this out on my own. And so when you are having those check ins and they're sharing with you how their experience is going, what they're doing, how they're navigating their time here on campus, there may be some things that you have some question marks about where you're like, oh, wow, you're doing that, or oh, you're having that experience. And so if you do have questions, we invite you to ask those questions of your student, but really think about it from a place of curiosity. Like, hey, I'm curious, what were you thinking when you had this experience, or how were you navigating this? And so really looking at it from a place of, I want to collaborate with you versus, again, being in that driver's seat and really driving the decision making with your student. And then, as much as you can, try to support their own problem solving. And so, again, you may want to lay out those options and say, this is what I think you should do, and this is how I would like for you to navigate this. But we know that true learning occurs when students are able to sit down, process what's happening, identify what are the available options for them, and then decide how they would like to move forward. And as best as you can, we want to invite you to not jump in, rescue, save the day, because we know that a lot of learning can occur when students are able to take ownership of their decisions, and then also be able to experience the consequence of what those decisions may be, whether it's good or bad. Um, Again, reinforcing that trust and belief, you have really done a great job with your students. And so you deserve to be able to pat yourself on the back and know that you have gotten them to this point, to where they are right now in the semester. And so that's why I always say congratulations to the parent as well as the student when they are here on campus, because I know it took a lot of work to get them here. So we want you to trust and believe that those skills that you've instilled and things that you've practiced with them, they're going to be able to apply that here on campus. And then as your student grows, adapt. As your student grows, we want you to adapt along with them. And so the student that you're sending out of your home to be on campus may not be the same student you receive back when they return to break, because they've had a lot of new experiences, they've met new people, they're learning more about themselves as they're navigating this experience. And so you may see some changes. And so there's going to be some things that we want you to think about and look out for, which you'll learn more about in this presentation. Then there's going to be other things that you're going to embrace as you're noticing that they're growing into a young adult. And so you can go to the next slide. And you can put all those up for me. All right. And so one of the important things that I always encourage parents to do when I do have the opportunity to chat with parents as they're preparing for their students transition to campus is really having an honest conversation about managing realistic expectations, not just for the students, but also for you as the parent. And so, really normalizing struggle as a part of growth. So, often when we think about what we see, and we know students are consumers of social media. And so, as they're looking at their peers on other college campuses, or they're looking at people who are navigating their first year experience, people show the highlight reel, right? All the things that are going incredibly well, all the things that are going according to plan. And people are sometimes hesitant to share the struggle. And so then there's this false narrative that if you are struggling, or if you're not having this really exciting time, that means that you don't belong. And that's not always the reality. And so as much as you can, if your student is sharing that they're struggling with connecting, or they're wanting to make friends, or they're trying to figure out how this experience is supposed to look for them, really normalizing that, hey, if you struggle along the way, that is okay. That's a part of the learning experience, and really encouraging them to embrace it and think through how they can move through it. of course, also talking about that learning curve that may occur, because we know that UAB students are incredibly high achievers. And that's one of the reasons why they selected UAB for the institution that they wanted to attend. And so there's going to be some things that are learning about themselves and about this experience academically as well as outside of the classroom, that there may be a gap where it's like, oh, I was the top of my class, or making friends came really easy when I was in high school, but now that I'm here on this campus, I'm trying to figure out how to best navigate that. And so, again, a realistic expectation is that there may be somewhat of a learning curve that occurs here. We also encourage you to discuss career realities very early, because often a lot of our students have some really high expectations and their eyes are set on that one goal, which we want them to persist to graduation to become what they set out to become. But then you may get on campus and realize that, wait, I wanted to be a medical doctor, but now that I've had this experience with business or whatever it may look like, that way I may have some different ideals here, and that's okay. And so we want to make sure that we're discussing and being open to that as well. And so, as well as encouraging resilience and not perfection. And so knowing that, you know what, you may fall, there may be some mishaps, but as long as you're getting back up, that you're pushing through, that you're taking care of yourself, those are the things that are going to be important. And then your role as a parent is offering support without over compromising. So you can offer support. Again, we're in that passenger seat now, but there may be some times when you may need to be a little directive, right? Because your student may not have a clear or realistic expectation of what that experience may be. And that is where you're going to realize that, oh, wait, maybe I need to be a little bit more directive, but you're going to find that flow as you navigate through the semester with your student. And a very important one is your student has access to a lot of free resources here on campus. And so, as much as you can, learn what those resources are so that then, as your student is sharing just different challenges or experiences that they're having, you're able to refer them to the free resources that they have available to them. And so I like to share this because a lot of the times our students have this expectation that this is going to be very linear, very smooth, and that there's not going to be any hiccups, any bumps in the road. But we know that that's not the reality. The reality looks a little bit more messy, and that's okay. Often, what I share with students is that you're going to find that obviously what you do in the classroom, that's very important. But when you reflect back on your time in college, it's going to be a lot of those co-curricular experiences, the things that are happening outside of the classroom, those kind of negative experiences, the challenges where you were really pushed to grow and learn about yourself. Those are going to be the moments that you reflect on. And there's going to be this sense of pride that I was able to get through this and I persisted to graduation. And so, as you're having that conversation about discussing realistic expectations, that's one that I always start with, that, hey, it may get a little messy. It may feel like an entangled web, but you have a lot of resources here to help get you from point A to point B. All right, you put all those up there for me. And so, as Carmen is putting those up for me, as you see, there's a lot of different things that you can do to help model healthy coping skills. And so, going back to that slide where we talked about charcuterie board, you're going to be getting a lot of information throughout this presentation, because I want to give you options. I want to give you the opportunity to identify what's going to work and what may not work, and things that you're willing to try. And so, some things that you can do to model healthy coping skills, and this is for you as the parent, because often students come and they're just not quite sure how to handle distress or what to do when they're experiencing big emotions. And so they tend to look to the people who are closest to them. How do they handle difficult situations? How are they navigating when they are presented with challenges? And so, things that you can do is being honest about how you're feeling as your student is navigating this transition. So, if there are some mixed emotions, if there's a lot of excitement, if you're having some reservations, really thinking about how can you share that in a way to where your student can hold that and has the capacity to process through it, but then also being honest about your experience. So, some things that you can do is naming and normalizing your own emotions, because again, your student may also be sharing some of what you're experiencing. If you're having some setbacks yourself as you're thinking through what this transition is going to look like, or maybe it's not even related to their transition. Maybe there's some other life stuff that's going on. Being able to talk about those setbacks in a constructive way, so not in a way that feels as if we're spiraling or we're just stuck in this circular motion with no movement, but talking through, okay, this is the setback that I've experienced. This is how I'm thinking through how I would want to work through this problem. And this is how I am planning to move ahead. And by doing that, you're now modeling to your student that if I have a problem, it is not world ending. Because my parent has shown me that if I think through what my options are, I am able to navigate this effectively. Talk about prioritize and talk about self-care. And so talk about the things that you're doing to take care of yourself when things are becoming overwhelming, when you are navigating challenges in the workplace or with family. What are you doing to take care of yourself? Sharing those strategies with your student so then they can think about what's in their toolkit and what are things that maybe they can add so that they can take care of themselves as well. And then be open to seeking support. And so if you have folks that are a part of your support system, identify who those people are so your student knows that, hey, my parents aren't navigating these challenges alone. They have some supports and they lean into their supports. So then when I am having challenges, I need to identify who my people are. Again, the purpose of this is to model what are those healthy coping strategies and skills that you're using so that your student can then learn from you. And then using your check-ins to model emotional regulation. And so when you are checking in with your student and they're saying some things that you're like, oh, I'm not quite sure if mom should be hearing this, right? Or whatever that may be, just taking a moment to pause, right? Breathe, do some things to help check in with yourself and regulate your own emotion. And what you're doing is you're showing your student that I can handle this, right? I can handle when you're sharing the things that feel incredibly uncomfortable. And I am going to show you how I am going to model my emotions so that I can be present and receive what you're sharing with me. And so be slow to react and just take time to pause, process, and regulate your own emotion so that your student can see how to model that for themselves. So, as I shared earlier, there's going to be an opportunity as you are checking in with your student when they come home for the weekend or when they come home for break, where you may notice that, okay, something feels a little different, or I'm hearing something that doesn't feel as if it's what I'm used to seeing when I engage with my student. So, some things are going to be normal adjustment. Then there's going to be some other things where you're like, okay, this feels like there's some red flags. And so we want you to know what those warning signs are that we would encourage you to encourage your student to think about student counseling services as a resource. And so if you're noticing some increased and persistent anxiousness and worry, and so this is when it just feels like that cloud is hovering around your student and they just feel incredibly consumed by anxiety, things that typically would not cause a reaction are starting to do so for your student, and you're noticing they're getting really anxious about things that they can't control. That can be a sign that there may be something going on. If you're noticing low energy, depressed mood, just things that just doesn't feel typical for your student, that too can be a sign. Emotional outbursts, when I'm even talking with students when I go into the classroom, a lot of students share that they know that they are operating outside of their baseline. Things feel incredibly overwhelming when that fuse starts to get shorter and they are starting to respond in a way that is disproportionate to what is actually occurring. And so if you're noticing in your check-in that your student seems a little agitated, or you're asking questions from a place of curiosity, but it feels like their response is is big. That may be a moment to just pause and check in. If they're reporting that they're struggling with sleep, that's typically a telltale sign that something is going on. Appetite is also another one where students will say that they're eating more or eating less because of the stress that they're experiencing. We know that connection is something that we need. And typically, when students are incredibly overwhelmed, what happens is they start to go back into their shell. They start to isolate and withdraw. And so if that's something you're hearing as a part of your students' narrative, that they typically have a weekly meeting with, their study group, and they tell you that I actually haven't been meeting with my study group. I actually haven't left my room. I'm not really talking to my roommate. That can be a sign that something more is going on. Use of substances to cope. Your student may be honest with you about their relationship with substances, or you may see some things that tells you that something deeper is going on. And so being willing to have a conversation with your student from a place of non-judgment, just because you want to assess where they are, what's going on. And then if you realize that there's some things that you want them to get support with, we do have the collegiate recovery community, which I'll share some information about the CRC in this presentation as well. And then drastic changes in behavior. And this is typically the one that people see and they say, okay, something is going on. I need to get my students support. It may not always be drastic changes, but we do have this on the list because it is a warning sign. What you're more likely to see is some of these other things. And so really keeping your eye out. So, what are the concerns that we are seeing in student counseling? And so, our counselors, we are licensed in the state of Alabama. We see a variety of mental health concerns that range from adjustment, transition, to anxiety, depression, really any, even some severe mental illness. We see a lot of that in our center, and we are equipped to support them. And so some things that came up when we pulled the numbers in terms of what were students presenting concerns, we saw a lot of grief, we saw trauma, again, that transition adjustment. Financial stress was a big one for a lot of our students, social anxiety, burnout, lack of motivation, and depression. But again, that scope is wide. We see a lot of things, but these were some of those top concerns. And so if your student is sharing in their narrative about just some of the challenges that they're experiencing, please know that student counseling services, we are equipped to help your student navigate what those challenges are. And so when you are, and I know that it can be incredibly difficult to have conversations like these with your student. When you notice that something is going on, as a parent, you're incredibly concerned. You want to come in, rescue, and save the day, but you also want to share with them that, hey, these are concerns that I'm having, and this is how I would like to support you. And so we encourage you to be cautious of your language, to try not to be to try not to come off as judgmental, but really just stating your observations. Examples of this can be, hey, I noticed that the last couple of weeks when we checked in, you expressed that you haven't left your room much. And I'm concerned that you may be isolating yourself, withdrawing from your friends. Just tell me a little bit more about what's going on. And so we're stating what we're observing, but we're also giving them the opportunity to respond, giving them the opportunity to share what they're experiencing so that we're able to work with them. And so that is what that communication can look like. Asking open-ended questions as best as you can, because we want to understand what is that student's point of view. We don't want to make assumptions. Now, there, your student, so there's going to be times when you're like, I got a good idea of what's going on, but let's just kind of hold that for a moment and let's allow the student to respond. And as best as you can, accepting your student as they are, accepting them where they are in their journey, managing your feelings about some of the choices they may be making, as long as those choices are not dangerous, right? But really allowing your student to navigate this experience and know there's going to be some things that they may engage in, things they may do that you're like, ooh, if I had my choice, I would maybe choose that you not do that. But it's all a part of their experience. And as they're navigating that, they're going to learn what works for them and what doesn't. And you want to make sure that they keep the line of communication open. So if they're open to share things and you're responding with a lot of judgment, and a lot of big feelings, what you're doing is closing that door, right? To where they're not going to want to share when things are really happening because they're not quite sure how you're going to respond. And we don't want students holding information because they're worried about parents' response. And then hope. If your student is stressed, tired, or overwhelmed, just really reminding them that they are not alone. There's a lot of resources here on campus. There's a lot of peer to peer mentorship opportunities. Really, there's just we want students to know there's a culture of care here at UAB, and we truly care about them as a student, and that we have resources on campus to help them to be successful while they're here. So I want you all to know the resources that are available. And so student counseling services, we are a resource. I wanted to keep this short with, we are here. Our office, we're in the Student Health and Wellness Center. All of our services are free and confidential for enrolled UAB students. We even see students during the breaks. And so fall break, what is it? Thanksgiving break, not Thanksgiving break, winter break, things like that. We're still seeing students, summer break. And so making sure that students know that we are here for them. And we understand. So we can help with all the not on the syllabus issues. Because often when students come, it's all the stuff that's happening outside of the classroom. And so those are definitely things that we can help support. And then we also can provide support for some of the challenges that they're facing in the classroom. I'm sure that there was a webinar with DSS, which is Disability Support Services, and we can assist with providing accommodation letters. So if your student needs accommodations, they can meet with one of our counselors, go through that assessment, and our counselors can provide a letter to support the accommodations that they are requesting. And then encouraging your student to reach out early. Often students wait until they're in crisis because they have this belief that either things are going to get better or they'll manage this, if they have a little bit more time. But what happens is as time goes on, things sometimes can get worse. And once things are worse, students don't know what to do. And so we encourage students that we like to remind students that they don't have to be in crisis to reach out to our office. And we actually encourage that they reach out early, and that they don't need to justify seeking support. Because sometimes students will say, well, all I'm struggling with is just, I feel lonely. I don't want to waste the counselor's time just because I'm lonely. There's people who have bigger issues, right? And so what we express to students is that if you are having a challenge, no matter how you perceive it to be big, small, or in between, we want you to reach out. Our counselors, again, with that top presenting concern, adjustment and transition concerns are some of the top reasons our first year students are coming to our office. And so that is a common reason for their student to visit us. And so really wanting you to make sure that you encourage your student to reach out no matter how big or how small they perceive the problem to be. So what your student can expect when they reach out. So there's a 15-minute phone call that they have. And during that conversation, the counselor is asking, hey, what's going on? What's bringing you to counseling? And there's a conversation on how student counseling can best support them. Their first appointment is a 50-minute appointment. And then after that, they're able to have their individual appointments with their counselor. And then we also encourage students to utilize the 24/7 digital resources that UAB has invested a lot of money into, so that students have 24/7 access to support. And so another reminder, all of our counseling is free and confidential for enrolled students. And what that confidentiality piece means for you all as students is if your student accesses services with our office, because we want to protect your student's privacy as well as the integrity of counseling, we can neither confirm nor deny if your student is accessing support through us. Now, there are circumstances to which we would notify an emergency contact. So please make sure you are the person that's listed in your student's account as the emergency contact, because we do go there if there is a hospitalization. So if we recommend hospitalization, if the student is hospitalized or transported, we do reach out to the emergency contact to inform them of what's going on. But otherwise, we do not make contact unless the student has signed a release indicating that we can share that information with whom they put on that form. So I want to also, another good resource for you to know about, and I shared this earlier when I was talking about knowing the warning signs, is the Collegiate Recovery Community, which is under Student Counseling Services. So the Collegiate Recovery Community is a peer-driven community that really supports all pathways to recovery. And so when the Collegiate Recovery Community was founded, it really had a focus on supporting students who are in recovery from substance misuse. But what we have found is students have found this space to be incredibly supportive, even if they're not struggling with substance use, whether that be that They're, have some mental health challenges that they are navigating and want support. If they're struggling with other forms of addiction, whether it be sports gambling or anything else that may be an addictive related behavior, that we're seeing that students are really finding support within this space. And so the collegiate recovery community, it is located on 12th Street South over there by UAB Howlands, because the idea when we created this space is we wanted students to have a space that was close enough to campus, but also gives them that amenity, that privacy to be able to access the space without judgment. And so they offer something really every single day, Monday through Friday. They have weekly recovery meetings. They have sober social gatherings. There's opportunity to check in with our professional staff. There's a clinical case manager who has office hours over there. We have, and the assistant director is a licensed social worker. And so there's a lot of opportunity for your student to get support. And then there's also students who are in the space who kind of serve in like an unofficial mentor role, if you will, in really providing support to students. And so they do a lot of socials. They did a bowling night where they had like 20 plus students who went to Vestavia Bowl, and they had a really good time. And so this can really be a good space for your student to just lean into some peer-to-peer support. When I talked about those digital resources, there's a lot of them. And so I didn't want to include all of them here because it can be a little overwhelming about all the support, but know that the support exists. So the support that I wanted to really focus in on is our UAB Well app. And this is an app that you all can download and have on your phone as well. And so the UAB Well app is an app that was actually designed by students. And this app was designed by students in partnership with IT, because they realized they needed an app that was like a hub for all of their wellness resources. And so students are able to schedule appointments with student counseling, with student health. They have access to Engage, which you may have learned a lot about Engage here in these different webinars. And it pulls from Engage all the wellness events that are happening on campus. So if your student is interested in what's going on campus that may have a wellness focus, they're able to see those events through the app. The app also has a self-care plan in there, so students are able to fill out a self-care plan and get push notifications to keep them on track as it relates to their self-care plan. And then also there's access to all the digital resources, so the resources such as Tao, Together all those things live within this app. So I like to refer to it as like our mental health hub, and it is a free download from whatever that mobile app store is on your device. And so I encourage you to download it so you can take a look at it and encourage your student to do so as well. So that wraps us up. I know there was a lot of information, but I do hope that you are able to take something that works for you, have one thing that you're willing to try as you're thinking about your students' transition. And so you can contact us by phone, email, you can visit our website. But now I'm willing to take questions because I'm sure you may have some questions as you're thinking about your students' transition.
Thank you, Erica. If you all haven't done so already, please make sure that you take a screenshot of the information for the student counseling services. Erica, we do have one question that has come in so far. If a student is currently receiving counseling services at home, how do they make that transition to counseling services on campus? Can they like transfer their services to campus? How does that work?
Absolutely. And that is an excellent question. Thank you so much for asking. And so, yeah, and that's actually pretty common where students will say, I was receiving services with my counselor that I was seeing weekly or bi-weekly back at home. And now that I am here, I want to establish care with your office. And so we don't request records. Your student is welcome to get their records transferred over, but we establish services with our office. And as long as they're here on campus, they're able to, when I say on campus, not physically, they can, as long as they're enrolled is the better way to say that. But as long as they're enrolled as a student at UAB, they're able to access services with our office. Now, what we do encourage students is that So let's say we have a student who is here for the fall semester, they're wanting to do therapy while they're here, and then they decide that, oh, wait, my counselor at Student Counseling Services isn't available. I'm going to reach out to my counselor back at home. Now, there's something in our ethics and just our board in terms of two counselors seeing one client. So we do ask that if they are going to be seen by us, that they continue care with our office. And if they are going to go back to their counselor, that they let us know so we can make note of that. And then we can continue seeing them once they've wrapped up things with their therapist. And so it's the back and forth that can get confusing for clients. But as long as they're enrolled, I always encourage them because it's just easier to get set up with our office.
Thank you, Erica. So to go along with that question, when a student is currently receiving counseling services at home and now they're transitioning to the services on campus to assist with their mental health and whatever else they need counseling for, how does that transition work when a student has medication?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's really great is that Student Health and Wellness Center was housed in that building is Student Counseling Services, Wellness Promotion, and Student Health Services. And so if your student is being prescribed medication to treat a mental health concern, then they can do talk therapy, which will be through student counseling, and then they can get their medication refills through Student Health Services. It's a very easy process. They schedule an appointment with Student Health. They do their medication evaluation. They share that they want a refill, and it's a super smooth process.
Thank you. So while we are waiting for more questions to come in, I'll ask some questions that people may be considering or they may think about later. So how does a parent or family member navigate the road when their student is going through something but they're not really saying anything? How does that work? How does a parent or family member encourage their student to get help, even though their student is not saying anything, but they are recognizing, some of those symptoms that you spoke of?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the challenge that you're asking a question about, sometimes we see that in therapy as well, where we can tell that something else is going on, but the student is maybe reluctant to share, or maybe they don't have a lot of awareness. Because sometimes we can see that the student is in crisis, but their awareness to identify that something is going on may be low. And so, what I encourage you to do as a parent is to plant those seeds. And so seed planting can look like just stating what you're observing. Like, hey, I've noticed that you're not fill in the blank, right? And sharing that from a place of genuine care and concern. And then also reminding them of what's available for them as support. Number one, you're there. So, hey, I noticed that you're having this experience, or I'm seeing these things. And so I want to first name that, but I also want you to know that I am here when you are ready to talk about it. And really just continuing to plant and water that seed. And you do that by continuing to state what you're observing, sharing opportunities for support, including yourself as a part of that support. And then if you're noticing things that start to feel like, okay, these are red flags that I'm really concerned about, it may be time to, hey, step things up and say, hey, I've noticed this. I'm really worried about you. This is what I want you to consider as your options for support. And that's when I meant where you may get a little directive. And that's okay, because you can be directive and still be a collaborator with your student and say, hey, these are your choices. And I want you to think through which option you want to lean into. But ultimately, I want you to be safe and be well. And what I'm seeing has me concerned that you may not be safe and you may not be well.
Thank you, Erica. So we don't have any additional questions that have come in. Do you have some takeaways that for our family members and parents or students who are going to watch this live stream and webinar later on?
Yeah. And so I think if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, is really thinking about knowing that student counseling is here to support your students mental health. And so if your student is having some challenges that you're not quite sure what to do with, because sometimes it's not as easy to identify. They may share that, oh, I'm struggling making friends, I'm struggling with connection and loneliness, I'm struggling with filling in the blank. And sometimes we don't think about counseling when we hear that. And so knowing that counseling can be a really good resource, because we have such great relationships with our campus partners, that if they land in the counseling space, that we can provide support, but then also get them connected to other offices. And so I think counseling can be an incredibly good place to start if your student is struggling with adjustment and transition. And so that's one. The second piece is really thinking about um, how can you transition into your role as a collaborator with your student? Because what we have found is that sometimes the distress that students are experiencing is because their responsibility feels overwhelming. Just the decision fatigue, having to constantly make decisions that before they really weren't responsible for. Maybe their parent was cooking their dinner every day, so they weren't having to make a decision about what they were going to eat. Their parent may have been washing their clothing, so they weren't having to make decisions about when they're going to really be strategic about when they're going to do their laundry. And so I know we only got a few more weeks before the semester starts, but I want to encourage you to start thinking about, okay, how can we start collaborating? How can I really allow my student to be in the driver's seat? They may have questions for you, and take a moment to pause and not be quick to give them an answer, but say, you know what? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. What are you thinking about? What would you like to decide in this situation? And your students may surprise you. They may jump right in and take the reins and start with that decision making. But for others, they may need the practice to really think through, how do I start making decisions for myself? How do I start looking at the bigger picture? And so doing those, kind of practicing that now, I think is going to be incredibly helpful, so that when your student is here and they're now responsible for those everyday decisions that they may not have been responsible for, they have a little bit of capacity and bandwidth to work through that.
Thank you, Erica. Everyone, I thank you all so much for joining us today for our informative webinar on student counseling services. Please feel welcome to reach out to Erica and all of the staff at Student Counseling Services for all of your students' needs, whether they're going through something now or later. We do have another webinar that is coming up at 12 o'clock today, which is wellness promotion. And just like I stated earlier, you all will be receiving a survey at the end of this webinar, so that you all can present your questions and comments and let us know how we can better assist you and your students throughout the academic school year. And just a quick reminder, as if I haven't given you all a million already, Family Weekend for the new academic school year is going to be October 2nd through the 4th. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you all to connect with your students again. And what else do we have, Carmen?
Oh, that's great. And we have definitely Family Weekend, the 10th actually, annual Family Weekend. And so you will be part of a milestone, and then join us for the webinar at 12 on wellness promotion. And we have webinars next week, first generation, and also dentistry, the School of Dentistry. So thank you, both Erica and Keisha, for being here today. And we look forward to seeing the rest of our families in about 15 minutes if you can join us for the Wellness Promotion webinar. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.